The scent of lilies and roses, a fragrant cloud of pure, unadulterated joy, filled the air. I breathed it in, a giddy, lightheaded sensation bubbling in my chest. Today was the day. The day I'd been dreaming of since I was a little girl, the day I would marry Rob, the love of my life. My reflection in the ornate, full-length mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Not the everyday Helen, the one with her hair scraped back in a messy bun and a smudge of paint on her cheek from her latest art project. No, this was a bride. A vision in ivory lace, with pearls woven into my intricate updo, and a smile that felt like it could light up the entire city. My best friend, Clara, stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "You're breathtaking, Helen," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely breathtaking." I met her eyes in the mirror, my own welling up with tears. "I can't believe it's finally happening," I said, my voice a little shaky. "It feels like a dream." "Well, it's not," she said, squeezing my shoulder. "It's real, and Rob is the luckiest man in the world." Clara had been my rock through everything. We'd been inseparable since kindergarten, sharing secrets, dreams, and heartbreaks. She'd been there for my awkward teenage years, my disastrous first dates, and the moment I'd met Rob. She'd even helped me pick out the dress, a custom-made creation that had cost a small fortune but was worth every penny. It was a masterpiece of silk and lace, with a flowing train that made me feel like a queen. "Is it time?" I asked, my heart doing a frantic little dance against my ribs. "Almost," she said, a strange little smile playing on her lips. "Just a few more minutes." She fussed with the veil, her fingers surprisingly clumsy. I attributed it to nerves, the same ones that were making my own hands tremble. The wedding was a grand affair, held at a historic mansion with sprawling gardens. We spared no expense, wanting everything to be perfect. And it was. The string quartet was playing softly in the background, the sun was shining, and the guests were starting to arrive. I could hear the murmur of their voices, a happy, expectant hum. "I need to go check on the caterers," Clara said, her voice a little too bright. "I'll be right back." I nodded, my attention already drifting back to my reflection. I practiced my vows under my breath, the words a familiar, comforting rhythm. I thought about Rob, his easy smile, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed. I couldn't wait to see his face when he saw me walking down the aisle. The minutes ticked by. The initial excitement began to curdle into a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Where was Clara? And where was my dress? The seamstress had delivered it that morning, a vision in a pristine white garment bag. I hadn't even had a chance to put it on yet. I'd been saving the moment, wanting it to be special. I stood up, my silk robe swishing around my ankles. "Clara!" I called out, my voice echoing in the suddenly silent room. No answer. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. I walked over to the closet where the dress was supposed to be hanging. The closet door was slightly ajar. I pulled it open, my heart sinking into my stomach. The closet was empty. My dress was gone. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at my throat. I frantically searched the room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. It had to be here. It had to be. Maybe Clara had taken it to be steamed or something. There had to be a logical explanation. My eyes fell on a small, white envelope lying on the dressing table. My name was written on it in Rob's familiar, messy scrawl. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It felt strangely light, as if it contained nothing but air. I tore it open, my heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against my ribs. The note was short, just a few cruel, hastily written lines. "Helen, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I'm in love with Clara. We're leaving together. Don't try to find us." The words blurred, the ink swimming before my eyes. I read them again and then a third time, but they wouldn't make sense. It was a joke, a cruel, twisted joke. Rob loved me. Clara was my best friend. This couldn't be happening. I stumbled back, my legs giving way beneath me. I sank onto the floor, the note fluttering from my numb fingers. The beautiful, sun-drenched room suddenly felt like a prison, the scent of flowers cloying and suffocating. The string quartet was still playing, a mocking, cheerful melody that grated on my raw nerves. The door opened and my mother bustled in, her face wreathed in a happy, expectant smile. "It's time, darling, are you?" Her smile faltered as she took in the scene. Me, crumpled on the floor, my face a mask of disbelief and despair. The empty closet. The note. "Helen," she whispered, her voice filled with alarm. "What is it? What's wrong?" I couldn't speak. I could only point to the note, my hand shaking uncontrollably. She picked it up, her eyes scanning the words. The color drained from her face. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and horror. "Oh, my baby," she whispered, rushing to my side and pulling me into her arms. "Oh, my poor, poor baby." But I was beyond comfort. The world had tilted on its axis, sending me spinning into a black, bottomless abyss. The perfect day, the perfect love, the perfect life I had so carefully constructed had all been a lie. A cruel, elaborate lie. And the two people I trusted most in the world had been the architects of my destruction. The world had shrunk to the four walls of my bedroom. The curtains were drawn, blocking out the relentless, cheerful sunshine. The scent of lilies and roses had been replaced by the stale, cloying smell of grief. I hadn't left my bed in 3 days, the silken sheets a tangled mess around me. My phone was off, the endless barrage of pitying texts and concerned voicemails too much to bear. I was a ghost in my own life, haunting the ruins of my shattered dreams. My mother tried her best. She would bring me trays of food, her face etched with a worry that made me feel even more pathetic. I would pretend to eat, just to make her go away. The truth was, I couldn't stomach anything. The thought of food made me nauseous. My body was in a state of rebellion, mirroring the turmoil in my soul. Friends and family came and went, their hushed whispers and sympathetic glances like daggers in my heart. They meant well, I knew, but their presence only amplified my shame and humiliation. I was a spectacle, a cautionary tale. The jilted bride, the fool who had been so blind. Sleep offered no escape. My dreams were a relentless, looping reel of my own personal horror movie. Rob's smile, Clara's laughter, the two of them together, their faces contorted in a mockery of love. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the phantom pain of their betrayal as fresh as the moment I'd read that cursed note. I replayed every memory, every conversation, every shared glance, searching for the signs I had so obviously missed. The late-night study sessions between Rob and Clara, which I had dismissed as innocent. The way Clara's eyes would linger on Rob a little too long, a flicker of something I had mistaken for admiration. The sudden, unexplained distance from Rob in the weeks leading up to the wedding, which I had attributed to pre-wedding jitters. It was all there, a breadcrumb trail of deceit that I had been too blissfully happy to see. I had been living in a fool's paradise, a carefully constructed illusion that had shattered into a million pieces. The anger came in waves, a hot, searing rage that threatened to consume me. How could they have done this to me? How could they have been so cruel, so calculating? One evening, my friend Sarah, a bubbly, no-nonsense woman who had been one of my bridesmaids, barged into my room, her patience finally at an end. She ripped open the curtains, flooding the room with the golden light of the setting sun. I flinched, shielding my eyes like a vampire. "Enough, Helen," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You can't stay in here forever. You need to face the world." "I can't," I whispered, my voice hoarse from disuse. "I'm not ready." "Tough," she said, pulling the duvet off me. "You're not going to let them win. You're not going to let them destroy you." She sat on the edge of the bed, her expression softening. "I know it hurts," she said, her voice gentle. "But you're stronger than you think. You're a fighter." Her words, meant to be comforting, only made me feel weaker. I wasn't a fighter. I was a victim, a casualty of a war I didn't even know I was fighting. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, had a plan. "We're going to get you out of this house," she announced. "We're going to go for a walk, get some fresh air, and then we're going to get very, very drunk." I didn't have the energy to argue. I let her bully me into the shower, the hot water a welcome shock to my numb senses. I put on the first clean clothes I could find, a pair of faded jeans and a baggy sweater. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at me. My eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, my skin pale and blotchy. I looked like a ghost, a pale imitation of the vibrant, happy woman I had been just a few days ago. The walk was a blur. The world outside my bedroom seemed too bright, too loud, too full of life. Every happy couple I saw sent a fresh pang of grief through me. The bar was dark and noisy, a welcome distraction from the turmoil in my head. Sarah ordered us a round of tequila shots, her eyes glinting with a mischievous light. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass, "and to karma being a bitch." I drank the tequila, the fiery liquid burning a welcome trail down my throat. We had another, and then another. The alcohol worked its magic, dulling the sharp edges of my pain, replacing it with a fuzzy, reckless numbness. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. It was on our way home, stumbling through the deserted streets, that Sarah dropped the bombshell. She'd been scrolling through her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's harsh glow. She stopped suddenly, her breath catching in her throat. "What is it?" I asked, my heart lurching with a familiar sense of dread. She hesitated, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and pity. "You're not going to want to see this," she said, her voice low. "Show me," I demanded, my voice surprisingly firm. She handed me the phone. It was a picture on a mutual friend's social media feed, a picture of Rob and Clara. They were on a beach, the turquoise water and white sand a picture-perfect backdrop. They were smiling, their arms wrapped around each other, the very picture of blissful happiness. The caption read, "Living our best life in Bali." A cold, hard knot formed in my stomach. The numbness of the alcohol evaporated, replaced by a chilling, laser-focused clarity. They were in Bali, living it up, while I was here, drowning in the wreckage of the life they had so carelessly destroyed. Something inside me snapped. The grief, the shame, the despair, it all coalesced into a single, powerful emotion, rage, a cold, calculating rage that was as sharp and clear as a shard of glass. They were not going to get away with this. They were not going to live their best life while I was left to pick up the pieces of mine. I looked at Sarah, my eyes burning with a newfound intensity. "I'm going to make them pay," I said, my voice low and even. "I'm going to make them regret the day they ever crossed me." Sarah looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now that's the Helen I know and love," she said. "Welcome back." The fight was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. But for the first time since my world had come crashing down, I felt a glimmer of hope. A dark, twisted, vengeful hope. And it was enough. The rage that had ignited in me that night with Sarah didn't fizzle out. It simmered, a low, constant burn beneath the surface of my carefully constructed composure. The initial, all-consuming grief had receded, leaving behind a hollow ache and a steely resolve. I went through the motions of life, returning to my job as a graphic designer, meeting friends for coffee, and pretending that I was okay. But it was all a performance, a mask I wore to hide the storm that was brewing inside me. Months passed. The seasons changed, the vibrant greens of summer giving way to the melancholic golds and reds of autumn. I moved into a new apartment, a small, minimalist space that was a world away from the cozy, cluttered home I had shared with Rob. I needed a clean slate, a place that wasn't tainted by the ghosts of my past. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I decided it was finally time to tackle the last vestiges of my old life, the boxes of Rob's belongings that were still stacked in the corner of my spare room. I had been putting it off, the thought of sifting through the remnants of our shared history too painful to contemplate. But I knew I had to do it. I had to purge him from my life, once and for all. I put on a playlist of angry, defiant music, the driving beat a welcome soundtrack to my grim task. I tore open the boxes with a vengeance, my movements sharp and efficient. Old photographs, concert tickets, love letters, I threw them all into a black trash bag, my heart a cold, hard knot in my chest. I was a woman on a mission, a warrior purging the battlefield of her past. It was in the last box, tucked away beneath a pile of his old college textbooks, that I found it. A worn, leather-bound notebook. I almost threw it away with the rest of the junk, but something made me pause. I opened it, my curiosity piqued. The pages were filled with Rob's familiar, messy scrawl, a jumble of notes, diagrams, and financial projections. It was his old business plan, a detailed, ambitious plan for a luxury travel agency he had dreamed of starting. He had called it Wanderlust Adventures. I remembered him talking about it endlessly in the early days of our relationship, his eyes shining with a passion and excitement that I had found so intoxicating. He had abandoned the idea years ago, deeming it too risky, too much work. He had settled for a safe, boring job in finance, his dreams gathering dust in a forgotten notebook. I sat on the floor, the notebook in my hands, the angry music a distant hum in the background. I read through the plan, my initial disinterest turning into a grudging admiration. It was a good plan, a very good plan. He had identified a gap in the market, a niche for bespoke, high-end travel experiences that went beyond the generic, cookie-cutter packages offered by most agencies. A spark ignited in me, a tiny, flickering flame in the darkness of my despair. An idea so audacious, so deliciously wicked that it took my breath away. What if I took his dream and made it my own? What if I built the company he had been too afraid to build? What if I beat him at his own game? The thought was intoxicating. It was a way to channel my rage, my pain, my grief into something productive, something powerful. It was a way to reclaim my narrative, to rewrite my story. I would no longer be the jilted bride, the pathetic victim. I would be the architect of my own success, the master of my own destiny. And the best part? It would be the ultimate revenge. Not a petty, vindictive act of sabotage, but a slow, systematic dismantling of his future. I would build a rival company, a better company, and I would crush him. I would take his dream and turn it into my weapon. The decision was made in an instant. A sense of purpose, so long absent, flooded through me. I felt a surge of energy, a renewed sense of vitality. The ghost of my former self, the heartbroken, grief-stricken woman who had been haunting the shadows of her own life, was finally gone. In her place was a woman of steel, a woman with a plan. I spent the rest of the weekend devouring the notebook, dissecting every detail of Rob's plan. I made notes, I asked questions, I identified its weaknesses and its strengths. I saw where he had gone wrong, where his ambition had been tempered by his fear of failure. I would not make the same mistakes. By the time the sun rose on Monday morning, I was a different person. I had a new identity, a new purpose. I was no longer Helen, the jilted bride. I was Helen, the entrepreneur, the founder and CEO of a company that would soon make Wanderlust Adventures a distant, forgotten memory. I would call it Elysian Escapes, a name that evoked a sense of paradise, of blissful, unforgettable experiences. It was a name that was as elegant and sophisticated as the company I was about to build. And it was a name that would soon be on the lips of every discerning traveler, a name that would become synonymous with luxury, exclusivity, and unparalleled service. Rob and Clara thought they had taken everything from me. They had taken my love, my trust, my future. But they had also given me something. They had given me a reason to fight. They had given me a purpose. And for that, I would make them pay. Dearly. The next few months were a blur of relentless, all-consuming work. I became a hermit, a recluse, my world shrinking to the confines of my small apartment and the endless resources of the internet. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford, replaced by caffeine-fueled nights spent hunched over my laptop, my eyes burning from the screen's harsh glow. I was a woman possessed, driven by a singular, all-consuming purpose, to build Elysian escapes from the ground up. My background was in art and design, not business. The world of finance, marketing, and corporate strategy was a foreign country, with a language I didn't understand. But I was a quick study. I devoured books on entrepreneurship, watched countless hours of online tutorials, and enrolled in a series of night classes at the local community college. I learned about profit margins, market analysis, and search engine optimization. I became fluent in the jargon of the business world, my vocabulary expanding to include words like synergy, leveraging, and return on investment. I transformed myself, shedding the skin of the heartbroken artist and donning the armor of a sharp, focused entrepreneur. I traded my paint-splattered jeans for tailored power suits, my messy bun for a sleek, no-nonsense bob. I learned to command a room, to speak with authority, to project an aura of confidence I didn't always feel. I was no longer the victim. I was a predator, stalking my prey from the shadows. My first major hurdle was securing a loan. I poured my heart and soul into my business plan, a meticulously crafted document that was a world away from Rob's dusty, forgotten notebook. I had a clear vision, a unique selling proposition, and a 5-year plan that was both ambitious and realistic. I knew my target audience, I had identified my niche, and I had a marketing strategy that was both innovative and cost-effective. I pitched my idea to a dozen banks, my voice unwavering, my gaze steady. I was met with a series of polite but firm rejections. I was too young, too inexperienced, my business too risky. The rejections were a bitter pill to swallow, a stark reminder of the uphill battle I faced. But I refused to be discouraged. I used each rejection as a learning experience, refining my pitch, strengthening my arguments, and hardening my resolve. Finally, after weeks of relentless persistence, I found a small, independent bank that was willing to take a chance on me. The loan officer, a shrewd, no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Gable, saw the fire in my eyes, the unwavering determination in my voice. She grilled me for 2 hours, her questions sharp and insightful. I met her gaze without flinching, my answers clear and concise. At the end of the grueling interview, she leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. "You've got guts, kid," she said, her voice a low, gravelly drawl. "I like that." She approved my loan, a modest sum that was just enough to get me started. I walked out of the bank, my legs trembling, my heart soaring. I had done it. I had taken the first concrete step towards making my dream a reality. With the loan secured, I threw myself into building my company. I found a small, affordable office space in a trendy, up-and-coming neighborhood. It was nothing fancy, just a single room with a desk, a chair, and a window that overlooked a bustling street. But it was mine. It was the headquarters of Elysian Escapes, the command center of my burgeoning empire. I designed the logo myself, a sleek, elegant design that incorporated a stylized phoenix, a symbol of my own rebirth from the ashes of my former life. I built the website from scratch, a visually stunning, user-friendly platform that showcased the unique, bespoke travel experiences I was offering. I wrote the copy myself, my words carefully chosen to evoke a sense of luxury, exclusivity, and adventure. Elysian Escapes was not just another travel agency. It was a lifestyle brand, a purveyor of dreams. I wasn't selling vacations, I was selling experiences. I was offering my clients the chance to escape the mundane, to embark on journeys of self-discovery, to create memories that would last a lifetime. My unique selling proposition was simple but powerful, unforgettable experiences for the discerning traveler. It was a direct jab at Rob's generic, one-size-fits-all approach to luxury travel. I knew his weaknesses, his lack of imagination, his tendency to cut corners. I would exploit those weaknesses, using them to my advantage. I spent countless hours researching exotic destinations, forging relationships with boutique hotels, and curating a collection of unique, off-the-beaten-path experiences. I wanted to offer my clients something they couldn't find anywhere else, something that was tailored to their specific interests and desires. Whether it was a private cooking class in a Tuscan villa, a hot air balloon ride over the Serengeti, or a spiritual retreat in the Himalayas, I would make it happen. The long nights and endless work took their toll. There were moments of doubt, of despair, when I felt like I was in over my head. The weight of my ambition, the sheer enormity of the task I had set for myself, threatened to crush me. But then I would think of Rob and Clara, living it up in Bali, their laughter echoing in my ears. And the anger, the rage, the burning desire for revenge would come roaring back, fueling me, driving me forward. I was no longer just building a business. I was forging a weapon that I would use to dismantle their lives piece by piece. They had stolen my past. I would steal their future. And I would do it with a smile on my face and a heart as cold and hard as steel. The day Elysian Escapes went live was anticlimactic. There were no fireworks, no champagne toasts, no grand opening ceremony. It was just me, alone in my small office, clicking a button that published my website to the world. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, a knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. I had poured my blood, sweat, and tears into this venture, mortgaging my future on a dream fueled by revenge. What if it was all for nothing? What if no one called? What if I failed? The first week was deafeningly silent. The only emails I received were spam, and the only calls were from telemarketers. The initial euphoria of launching my own business quickly evaporated, replaced by a gnawing, soul-crushing doubt. I started to second-guess everything. my business plan, my marketing strategy, my own abilities. Had I been a fool to think I could pull this off? Was this whole thing just a grandiose, self-destructive fantasy? I forced myself to stay positive, to stick to the plan. I spent my days networking, attending industry events, and building relationships with potential partners. I cold-called potential clients, my voice trembling at first, but growing steadier with each rejection. I became a master of social media, creating a curated, aspirational feed that showcased the unique, luxurious experiences Elysian escapes had to offer. I wrote blog posts about exotic destinations, created visually stunning travel guides, and engaged with my followers, building a small but loyal community. Slowly, painstakingly, things started to change. I got my first booking, a small weekend getaway for a young couple. I poured my heart and soul into planning their trip, negotiating upgrades, and adding personal touches that I knew would make their experience unforgettable. They came back raving about the trip, leaving a glowing 5-star review on my website. It was a small victory, but it was enough to reignite the flickering flame of hope in my heart. One booking turned into 2, then 3, then a steady stream of clients. My reputation for meticulous planning, personalized service, and unparalleled attention to detail began to spread. I was starting to make a name for myself, to carve out a niche in the crowded, competitive travel industry. But I never lost sight of my ultimate goal, to dismantle Rob's future. I kept a close eye on his fledgling company, Wanderlust Adventures. I followed his social media accounts, subscribed to his newsletter, and even had a friend make a fake inquiry to get a copy of his brochure. His offerings were exactly as I had expected, generic, overpriced, and utterly devoid of imagination. He was selling the same cookie-cutter luxury packages as every other travel agency, with no personal touch, no unique selling proposition, no soul. I knew I could do better. I made it my mission to target his potential client base, to steal his customers from right under his nose. I offered more exclusive packages, better deals, and a level of personalized service that he couldn't hope to match. I was the boutique, artisanal chocolatier competing with the mass-produced, generic candy bar. There was no comparison. My first major breakthrough came in the form of a wealthy, influential couple, the Vanderbilts. They were planning a lavish, month-long trip to Europe to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary, and they were looking for a travel agency that could create a truly unforgettable experience. They were exactly the kind of high-profile, deep-pocketed clients that Rob was trying to attract. I found out through a mutual acquaintance that they were considering Wanderlust Adventures. The news sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. This was my chance, my opportunity to strike the first major blow in my war against Rob. I spent a week researching the Vanderbilts, learning everything I could about their interests, their passions, their travel style. I discovered that Mrs. Vanderbilt was an avid art collector, with a particular fondness for the Italian Renaissance. Mr. Vanderbilt was a history buff, with a fascination for medieval castles. They were both foodies, with a love of fine wine and authentic regional cuisine. Armed with this information, I crafted a bespoke itinerary that was a masterpiece of personalized travel. I didn't just book them a suite at the Four Seasons in Florence. I arranged a private, after-hours tour of the Uffizi Gallery, followed by a candle-lit dinner on a secluded rooftop terrace overlooking the Arno. I didn't just book them a room in a generic 5-star hotel in the Loire Valley. I found a restored 15th-century chateau where they would be the only guests, with a private chef and a cellar full of vintage wine at their disposal. I didn't just book them a gondola ride in Venice. I arranged for them to be serenaded by a world-renowned opera singer as they floated down the Grand Canal. It was a work of art, a symphony of luxury, exclusivity, and personalized detail. It was everything that Wanderlust Adventures was not. I sent the proposal to the Vanderbilts, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew it was a long shot. They were already in talks with Rob, and I was the new kid on the block, the unknown quantity. But I had to try. A week later, I received an email from Mrs. Vanderbilt. Her words were short and to the point. "Your proposal is exquisite. We'd like to book it." I let out a whoop of triumph, the sound echoing in my small, empty office. I had done it. I had landed my first major client. I had stolen them from right under Rob's nose. The best part, the Vanderbilts had forwarded my proposal to Rob with a curt, one-line email. "This is what we were looking for. Thank you for your time." I could only imagine his face when he read it. The shock, the humiliation, the dawning realization that he had been outmaneuvered, outclassed, and outplayed. It was a sweet, intoxicating taste of victory, a promise of the even sweeter revenge that was yet to come. The war was far from over, but I had won the first major battle. And I knew, with a chilling, absolute certainty, that I would win the war. The Vanderbilt account was a turning point. It was like a dam had broken, unleashing a flood of new business. The Vanderbilts, thrilled with their bespoke European adventure, became my most enthusiastic ambassadors, singing my praises to their wealthy and influential friends. My client list grew exponentially, and Elysian Escapes was suddenly the name on everyone's lips. I was featured in luxury travel magazines, interviewed for business podcasts, and hailed as the new wunderkind of the travel industry. The success was intoxicating, but it was also overwhelming. I was working around the clock, a one-woman army trying to keep up with the ever-increasing demands of my burgeoning business. I knew I couldn't do it alone anymore. I needed to expand, to build a team, but I was hesitant. Trust was a commodity I no longer had in abundance. The betrayal of Rob and Clara had left me scarred, wary of letting anyone get too close. It was during a late-night scrolling session through a professional networking site that I saw a familiar name, Mark. He was a former colleague of Rob's, a sharp, ambitious young man who had been one of the first employees at Wanderlust Adventures. I remembered Rob talking about him, praising his work ethic and his keen business sense. But in recent months, I had heard whispers through the industry grapevine that Mark was unhappy, that he felt undervalued and stifled by Rob's arrogant and dismissive management style. An idea, cold and calculated, began to form in my mind. What if I could turn Rob's greatest asset into my own? What if I could poach his most valuable employee? I reached out to Mark, my message casual and non-committal. I told him I was an admirer of his work, that I was looking to expand my team, and that I would love to chat with him about his career goals. He responded almost immediately, his interest piqued. We met for coffee at a quiet, out-of-the-way cafe. Mark was just as I remembered him, bright, articulate, and radiating a restless energy. He spoke about his work at Wanderlust Adventures with a mixture of pride and frustration. He was proud of what he had helped build, but he was tired of being taken for granted, of seeing his ideas dismissed, of watching Rob take all the credit for his hard work. "He's a great salesman," Mark said, a bitter edge to his voice. "He can sell a dream like no one else, but he's a terrible manager. He's arrogant, he's impulsive, and he doesn't listen to anyone. The place is a mess. The morale is at an all-time low." I listened patiently, my expression a carefully crafted mask of sympathy and understanding. I didn't just offer him a job. I offered him a partnership. I told him about my vision for Elysian Escapes, my plans for the future. I told him I wasn't just looking for an employee. I was looking for a collaborator, a partner in crime. I offered him a generous salary, a stake in the company, and the opportunity to be part of something special, something that was built on a foundation of respect, integrity, and a shared passion for excellence. He was sold. He gave Rob his 2 weeks. Notice the next day, the news sending shockwaves through the small, insular world of the luxury travel industry. Mark was more than just a new employee. He was a treasure trove of insider information. He knew everything there was to know about Wanderlust Adventures, their client list, their pricing structure, their marketing strategies, their financial vulnerabilities. He was my man on the inside, my secret weapon in my war against Rob. With Mark's intel, I was no longer just competing with Rob. I was systematically dismantling his business. I knew which clients were unhappy, and I swooped in with a better offer. I knew his pricing, and I strategically undercut him, stealing his business from right under his nose. I knew his upcoming pitches, and I got their first, dazzling potential clients with my bespoke itineraries and my unparalleled attention to detail. Rob, blinded by his own arrogance, was completely oblivious. He saw my success as a fluke, a lucky break. He dismissed Elysian Escapes as a minor competitor, a boutique agency that posed no real threat to his grand ambitions. He was so consumed by his own ego, so convinced of his own superiority, that he couldn't see the web that was tightening around him. He blamed his string of bad luck on the market, on the economy, on the incompetence of his remaining staff. He became increasingly erratic, his temper flaring at the slightest provocation. He was a captain on a sinking ship, barking orders at a mutinous crew, completely unaware that I was the one who had torpedoed his vessel. I watched his downfall from a distance, a cold, satisfying sense of triumph washing over me. The pain of his betrayal had not disappeared, but it had been transformed. It was no longer a gaping wound, but a source of strength, a driving force that propelled me forward. I was no longer the victim. I was the victor. And the game was far from over. The news of Rob and Clara's wedding arrived, as most news did these days, through the digital grapevine. It was a glossy, over-the-top announcement in a high society e-magazine, complete with a series of professionally shot engagement photos. They were posed in a field of wildflowers, their smiles radiating a desperate, almost manic happiness. The headline read, "A love story for the ages. Travel magnate Rob Maxwell to wed socialite Clara Bell." Travel magnate. The words almost made me laugh. I knew, thanks to Mark's meticulous intel, that Wanderlust Adventures was a house of cards, teetering on the brink of collapse. Rob was hemorrhaging money, his reputation in tatters, his client list dwindling to a handful of clueless loyalists. This wedding wasn't a celebration of love. It was a desperate, last-ditch attempt to project an image of success, a lavish spectacle designed to fool the world into thinking he was still on top. They had poured everything they had, and a lot they didn't have, into this wedding. They had booked the most exclusive venue in the state, a sprawling, historic estate with manicured gardens and a ballroom that could accommodate 500 guests. They had hired a celebrity wedding planner, a Michelin-starred caterer, and a photographer who was famous for shooting royalty. It was a monument to their arrogance, a testament to their delusion. And it was the perfect stage for my final act. I felt no jealousy, no lingering sting of heartbreak. All I felt was a cold, clear sense of purpose. This was the moment I had been working towards, the culmination of years of relentless effort, of sleepless nights and single-minded focus. This was the endgame. My revenge would not be loud or explosive. It would be quiet, elegant, and utterly devastating. A masterpiece of strategic dismantling, executed with the precision of a surgeon and the artistry of a poet. My first move was the venue. The estate, a magnificent property called Blackwood Manor, was owned by a gruff, old-money tycoon named Mr. Harrington. He was a notoriously difficult man to deal with, but I had a secret weapon: his daughter, a sweet, unassuming woman who had been one of my first clients. I had planned her honeymoon, a bespoke 2-week safari in Botswana that had been the trip of a lifetime. She owed me a favor. I called her, my voice a carefully calibrated mixture of warmth and urgency. I told her about a very important client of mine, a reclusive billionaire who was looking to host a last-minute, top-secret event. The date, of course, was the same as Rob and Clara's wedding. The billionaire, I explained, was willing to pay double the usual rate, and he insisted on absolute exclusivity. Blackwood Manor was his first choice, but he was prepared to look elsewhere if they couldn't accommodate him. It was a long shot, but it worked. The allure of a billionaire's money, combined with a gentle nudge from his beloved daughter, was enough to sway Mr. Harrington. He found a loophole in his contract with Rob and Clara, a vaguely worded clause about unforeseen circumstances. He canceled their booking, offering them a full refund and a half-hearted apology. They were left scrambling, just 2 weeks before their wedding, with no venue and no hope of finding a comparable one at such short notice. My next target was the catering. I knew, from Mark's intel, that they had hired a trendy, up-and-coming chef who sourced all his ingredients from a small, exclusive network of local, organic farms. I used my own network of contacts, my own carefully cultivated relationships, to cut him off at the source. I hosted a lavish charity gala for Elysian Escapes on the same weekend as the wedding, buying out the entire stock of his key suppliers. The chef was left with no choice but to use inferior, mass-produced ingredients, a culinary nightmare that would be a slap in the face to his carefully crafted brand. But the final, most devastating blow was yet to come. For months, I had been quietly, systematically buying up Rob's debt. The business loans he had taken out to launch Wanderlust Adventures, the personal loans he had used to fund his lavish lifestyle, the credit card debt he had racked up to pay for Clara's expensive tastes. I had used the profits from my own thriving business to become his primary creditor. He had no idea. He was, for all intents and purposes, working for me. The day of the wedding was a beautiful, sun-drenched Saturday, the kind of day that mocks you with its perfection when your world is falling apart. I spent the morning at a spa, getting a massage and a manicure. I was calm, serene, my heart a steady, even rhythm in my chest. I had set the stage, the actors were in place, and the tragedy was about to begin. The first reports started trickling in around noon. Rob and Clara, in a desperate panic, had managed to find a last-minute replacement venue, a soulless corporate hotel ballroom that was a world away from the grandeur of Blackwood Manor. The guests were confused, the atmosphere tense. The flowers were wilting, the string quartet was out of tune, and the bride was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The catering was an unmitigated disaster. The food was cold, the presentation sloppy, the taste a bland, uninspired mockery of the Michelin-starred cuisine they had been promised. The guests whispered amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of pity and schadenfreude. It was then, at the height of the chaos, that I made my entrance. I was wearing a simple, elegant black dress, my hair styled in a sleek, sophisticated chignon. I looked like a woman who owned the world, a woman who was in complete and utter control. I walked into the ballroom, my heels clicking on the polished marble floor. A hush fell over the room. All eyes were on me. Rob and Clara stood at the head of the room, their faces a mask of horror and disbelief. Clara's dress, a frothy, over-the-top creation that was a poor imitation of the one she had stolen from me, was stained with champagne. Rob's face was pale, his eyes wide with a dawning, sickening realization. I walked towards them, my steps slow and deliberate. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, a cold, serene smile that didn't reach my eyes. "What are you doing here?" Rob finally managed to stammer, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I just came to offer my congratulations," I said, my voice as smooth as silk, "and to collect on a debt." I handed him a single, folded piece of paper. It was a notice of default, a legal document that informed him that I, Helen Richards, was the new owner of all his outstanding debts. It also informed him that, as he had used his assets as collateral, I was now the legal owner of his company, his apartment, his car, and everything else he thought he owned. He stared at the paper, his face turning a sickly shade of green. Clara, reading over his shoulder, let out a strangled sob. "You're ruined," I said, my voice a low, even whisper. "You have nothing. This sham of a wedding, this pathetic attempt to project an image of success, it's all built on a foundation of lies. And now the bill has come due." I turned to leave, my work done. I had taken everything from them. Their love, their trust, their future. I had left them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the bitter, suffocating taste of their own treachery. As I walked out of the ballroom, I caught my reflection in a large, ornate mirror. I saw a woman I barely recognized. Not the heartbroken, shattered girl I had been on my own wedding day, but a woman of steel, a woman who had been forged in the fires of betrayal and had emerged, stronger, harder, and more powerful than ever before. The ghost of my past was finally gone. I was free, and the victory was sweeter than I could have ever imagined.